The Ghost Army. WWII's greatest deception. What if I told you that during World War II, a small group of artists, designers, and sound engineers managed to fool an entire German army using nothing but inflatable tanks, fake radio chatter, and Hollywood magic? This isn't fiction, this is the incredible true story of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. Welcome back to History in the Shadow by SK. I'm Khalid, and today we're diving into one of World War II's most classified and ingenious operations. For decades, this story remained buried in classified files, but now we can finally tell the tale of how 1,100 American soldiers used deception, creativity, and pure audacity to save thousands of Allied lives and help win the war in Europe. If you love untold stories from history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're about to uncover a military operation so bizarre, it sounds like it came straight out of a spy novel. The birth of deception. Picture this. It's 1944, and the Allied forces are preparing for D-Day. But here's the problem. The Germans have a massive advantage. They're defending from fortified positions, they know the terrain, and they have experienced commanders who've been fighting this war for years. So Allied command comes up with a radical idea. What if we could make the Germans think our armies are somewhere they're not? What if we could create entire phantom divisions that exist only in the enemy's imagination? Enter Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Ingersoll, a former magazine editor, and Colonel Harry Reeder, who had a crazy vision: recruit artists, designers, actors, and sound engineers into the military. Not to fight with bullets and bombs, but to fight with brushes, speakers, and pure imagination. The unit they created was officially designated the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, but internally, they called themselves the Ghost Army. Their mission? To become masters of military deception on a scale never before attempted. Assembling the illusion, the recruitment process was unlike anything the military had ever done. They scoured art schools, advertising agencies, and even Hollywood studios. They wanted people who could think creatively under pressure, people who understood how to make the impossible look real. Among the recruits were Bill Blass, who would later become a famous fashion designer, Ellsworth Kelly, destined to become one of America's most celebrated artists, Art Kane, future renowned photographer, and dozens of other creative minds who would normally never see a battlefield. But here's where it gets interesting. These weren't just artists playing soldier. They underwent full military training. They learned to march, shoot, and follow orders just like any other unit. The difference? Their weapons were deception, and their battlefield was the German imagination. The Ghost Army's arsenal was revolutionary for its time. Visual deception. They had inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces so realistic that from 200 yards away, German reconnaissance couldn't tell the difference. These weren't crude balloon animals. They were precision-engineered decoys complete with fake tracks, heating elements to simulate engine warmth, and even dummy soldiers positioned around them. Audio deception. Using massive speakers that could project sound up to 15 miles, they created sonic deception. The sounds of entire armored divisions moving through the night. Tank engines, truck convoys, construction noise. All recorded and played back with theatrical precision. Radio deception. Fake radio traffic mimicking the communications patterns of real units. They studied how different divisions talked, their code words, their commanders' personalities, and replicated it all so perfectly that German radio interceptors believed they were tracking real American forces. Atmospheric effects. They even used fake smoke and lighting effects to simulate industrial activity, suggesting the presence of large supply depots and maintenance facilities. The first performance, their first major test, came in June 1944, just weeks after D-Day. The real 2nd Armored Division was being moved from one sector to another, a massive operation that would leave a dangerous gap in Allied lines. The Ghost Army's job? Make the Germans think the 2nd Armored never left. As the real tanks rolled away under cover of darkness, the Ghost Army moved in. By dawn, German observers looking through binoculars would see what appeared to be the same armored division still in position. Inflatable Sherman tanks sat in perfect formation. Radio operators maintained the 2nd Armored's communication patterns. Sound trucks played the ambient noise of a tank division at rest. The deception worked flawlessly. For 3 crucial days, while the real 2nd Armored Division repositioned for a major offensive, the Germans remained convinced they were still facing a full armored threat in the original sector. They kept their own reserves in place, exactly where Allied command wanted them. But this was just the beginning. Word of the Ghost Army's success spread quickly through Allied command, and suddenly everyone wanted their own Phantom Division's Operation Brest. The Ghost Army's most audacious performance came during the Siege of Brest, a heavily fortified German port in France. The Germans had 40,000 troops dug into concrete bunkers and coastal fortifications. Taking Brest would require a massive Allied assault, but Allied command had a different idea. What if they could convince the Germans that the main attack was coming from the east, while the real assault came from an unexpected direction? The Ghost Army deployed their full arsenal. They created an entire Phantom Army group, complete with hundreds of inflatable tanks, fake supply depots, and a communications network that suggested over 30,000 American troops were massing for an eastern assault. But here's the brilliant part. They didn't just create static displays. They choreographed an entire military theater production. Each night, they would rotate units, moving inflatable equipment to suggest normal military activity. They created fake construction projects, complete with sound effects of heavy machinery. They even had soldiers march in formation during daylight hours, but always at distances where German observers couldn't see individual faces. The Germans bought it completely. They reinforced their eastern defenses and moved their mobile reserves to counter the Phantom threat. When the real Allied assault came from the west, German forces were positioned exactly wrong. Brest fell in weeks rather than months, and thousands of Allied lives were saved because the defenders were looking the wrong way when the real attack began. Operation Viersen. By early 1945, the Ghost Army had become legendary within Allied command, but their greatest challenge was yet to come. As Allied forces approached the Rhine River, Germany's last natural defensive barrier, they faced a problem. The Germans expected the main crossing attempt at obvious points where the river was narrow and the terrain favorable. Allied command decided to attempt something unprecedented. Convince the Germans that the main assault would come at Düsseldorf, while the real crossing would happen 15 miles south at a place called Viersen. This time, the Ghost Army had to maintain their deception for 2 full weeks while real Allied forces secretly repositioned. It was their longest and most complex performance. They created an entire Phantom Army corps. Not just tanks and trucks, but fake headquarters buildings, supply depots, even dummy airfields with inflatable aircraft. The radio deception alone involved over 50 operators maintaining fake communications for Phantom units that existed only on German intelligence maps. But the Germans were getting smarter. They were using more sophisticated reconnaissance, including captured Allied equipment that could intercept radio transmissions with greater accuracy. The Ghost Army had to evolve their techniques constantly. They developed new tricks, fake laundry lines to simulate the domestic activity of a large encampment, controlled campfire smoke to suggest cooking for thousands of troops, even organized fake recreational activities that German observers could witness from a distance. The deception culminated in a masterpiece of military theater. As real Allied forces secretly moved into position at Viersen, the Ghost Army staged what appeared to be final preparations for a massive assault at Düsseldorf. They increased radio traffic, moved inflatable equipment in patterns that suggested pre-attack positioning, and used their sound trucks to simulate the kind of intense activity that precedes a major offensive. German command responded exactly as hoped. They concentrated their reserves at Düsseldorf and prepared for a battle that would never come. When the real Allied crossing began at Viersen, German resistance was minimal. By the time German command realized they'd been deceived, Allied forces had established a secure bridgehead across the Rhine. The war in Europe would end just weeks later. The human cost and moral complexity, 20 to 22 minutes. But the Ghost Army's story isn't just about clever tricks and military success. These were real soldiers, often operating closer to enemy lines than anyone else. Their inflatable tanks couldn't stop real bullets, and their artistic training couldn't protect them from artillery shells. Several Ghost Army soldiers were killed or wounded during their operations. They faced the same dangers as frontline troops, but with none of the psychological comfort of knowing they could fight back. When German patrols discovered their positions, the Ghost Army had to rely on speed and stealth to escape. There was also a moral dimension to their work that many struggled with. These artists and designers had been trained to create beauty, to inspire and uplift. Now they were using their talents to deceive and, ultimately, to help kill enemy soldiers more efficiently. Some veterans later described feeling conflicted about their service. They were proud of saving Allied lives, but troubled by the realization that their deceptions had sent German soldiers to their deaths in battles they couldn't win. Aftermath and legacy. When the war ended, the Ghost Army simply disappeared. Their equipment was destroyed or sold as surplus. Their records were classified for decades. The men returned to civilian life and, bound by military secrecy oaths, rarely spoke about their wartime service. Many went on to distinguished careers in art, design, and entertainment. They helped shape American visual culture in the post-war era, but their most significant contribution remained hidden. It wasn't until the 1980s that researchers began uncovering the Ghost Army's story. Even then, many details remained classified until the 21st century. Today, military historians recognize the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops as pioneers of psychological warfare and military deception. Their techniques influenced Cold War intelligence operations and continue to inform modern military doctrine. The idea that creativity and imagination could be weapons of war became a fundamental principle of contemporary military thinking. Conclusion: the Ghost Army story challenges our understanding of what warfare really is. These weren't traditional soldiers in any sense we recognize, yet they may have been among the most effective units in the entire Allied military. They proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a tank or a bomb. It's an idea. The idea that your enemy might not be where you think they are. The idea that what you're seeing might not be real. The idea that the very information you're using to make life and death decisions could be entirely fabricated. In an age of information warfare and digital deception, the Ghost Army story feels more relevant than ever. They were the first military unit to understand that reality itself could be a battlefield, and that controlling perception could be more important than controlling territory. The next time you see a movie with incredible special effects, or encounter a piece of innovative design, remember that some of those techniques were first developed not in Hollywood studios, but on European battlefields by artists who learned to wage war with imagination. Call to action. What do you think about the Ghost Army's methods? Was their deception justified by the lives it saved? Or does something about military deception trouble you? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of creative warriors, you'll love our video about the female codebreakers who helped crack the Enigma machine, link in the description. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from history that will change how you see the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Please subscribe our channel if you love to watching our more videos. Thank you.